Since Plato was Socrates' disciple, the dramatization of literary criticism can be considered as historical rather than fictional. In fact, some of the phrases there have been quoted both as evidence of opposed views about poetry. One of the interesting points that we will find emerging from Iron is that to have a rhapsodic attitude towards poetry or criticism is like being a critic without any break off of theory, who often would make such statements about any work as how touching or beautiful. Plato's own views about art emerged more clearly from his Republic. Most of these views he expressed in the context of his objection to poetry. In Phaedrus, he strongly objected to the nuisance value of the poet because of the latter's dependence on divine madness in his Republic. Plato expresses his distrust in very simple terms. Poetry, he says, feeds and waters the passions, creating division and unsteadiness in the heart of frivolous laughter. These are against positive civic values, and therefore, when any one of these pantomimic gentlemen, the poets, comes to us and makes a proposal to exhibit himself and his poetry, will fall down and worship him as a sweet and wholly wonderful being. But we must also inform him that in our state such as we are not permitted to exist, the law will not allow them. And so when we have anointed him with meat and set a garland of wool upon his head, we shall send him away to another city. For we mean to employ for our souls health, the rocker, and several poets or storytellers who will imitate the style of the virtuous only and will follow these models which we prescribed at first when we began the education of our soldiers. What are the main reasons for this? For one thing, if poetry produces immoral results, it is because of the nature of poetry itself. Thinks Plato. Poetry deals with a variety of motives and feelings, not all of which are desirable. The feelings could be both good and bad, producing pleasure and pain both. Also, poetry deals with fictitious incidents and characters. He gives the example of Homer and Ovid and the Greek dramatic poets who do not always represent God as wholly good, but these words are unlike. Quarrelsome, deceitful, and fallible. Their heroes are emotional or unheroic. In this context, Plato mentions his concept of imitation or mimesis. Plato develops this idea at different places in the Republic. More recently, Plato's dialogue, love, have been seen as the earliest impulse on love between men, which some modernists call Greek love. Which theory has renewed this attention on Platonic love? Plato, then we are coming to Aristotle. Aristotle 38 4 to 32 to BC was a student of Plato. Yes, we all know Aristotle was a student of Plato, and although his theories differ in many significant ways from Plato, although he is Plato's student, but his own theories were different from Plato's theory, often overturning them in equal reaction. They are also very independent on them. Metaphysical, he was also an idealist, although he believed that ideas were implied in things rather than existing outside of things as for the ultimate reality. He believed that the imperial world resulted uh, from thought thinking itself. How does that work? Well, it is complicated, and even if I explain it thoroughly, it still will not necessarily make sense. Besides, we can explain Aristotle's views about art without ever having to know how the reverse came about. So I will not touch upon that particular issue. I will not talk about them here, but I do encourage you to find out about them on your own. Okay, so this is IGNO's uh, paper printout book, Literary Criticism, Volume 1. So this book's author is a professor from IGNO. Some professor together wrote this book. Yeah. Aristotle, like Plato, says art is imitative, but like Plato, says it as imitating essence rather than accidents. Therefore, art is actually higher on the chain than the empirical world and elevates rather than lowers us. Of course, art, like everything else, has a formal cause to which it must adhere, and the best art, like the best desk, is as has a former cause to which it must adhere, and the best art, like the best desk, is the one which most closely imitates or participates in its particular form. Aristotle wrote Poetics to describe the various forms of the various arts. We know he wrote so much that would now run to several volumes, but his description of tragedy is the only in-depth exploration that is extant. Aristotle set a long tradition by applying the technique of natural science to art and establishing a taxonomy of artistic form. He described tragedy in terms of its four causes. Its material cause is in the grossest sense words and gestures. The These can be broken down into plot, character, thought, diction, spectacle, and song. Aristotle explains each of these at length. The formal cause is naturally tragedy. Pain, Aristotle defines, is the presentation of action as opposed to narration of action, which belongs to both epic and history. In which the efficient cause is the playwright. Okay, and the final cause, this is important, is the evocation of fear and pity for the purposes of purgation. Purgation, purgation. In other words, tragedy makes us feel bad so that we can get those feelings out of our system. When the audience is watching a performance of Oedipus Rex, do you know the story of Oedipus Rex? I'll discuss. Okay. Each member of it feels repelled by the hero's relationship with his mother, horrified when he blinds himself, pity for his helpless plight. Each of these feelings is an unhealthy part of the reviewer's emotional state, but in undergoing the emotional experience, he gets rid of the unhealthy emotion, however temporarily, thus ensuring and restoring emotional balance and health. The metaphor that Aristotle uses is that of a purgative. Oedipus Rex was the king. He was a he was कोर्स उसको कोर्स मिला था कि उस वो अपने पिताजी को मार देगा और अपनी मम्मी से शादी करेगा। तो ये जब उसको पता चला कि ऐसा उस पर अभिशाप है, तो उसने घर छोड़ दिया, घर छोड़ के चला गया, किंगडम उसका छोड़ के। बट इवेंचुअली दैट हैपेंड, दैट कोर्स, दैट कर्स, यस। That is the sad story, tragic story, Oedipus. Next, Oedipus, next. So, आज के लिए इतना ही, फिर कल आएंगे। ओके, बाय। ये मेरा पहला लाइव था। I don't have any idea how to manage this. So this is my first live video. Okay, मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में, नेक्स्ट लाइव में कल सुबह।